Hello, students. Welcome to your history class with the third chapter Ruling the Countryside. In this chapter, we will see how the company tried to bring some reform and collect revenue for the East India Company. So, on 12th of August 1756, the Mughal emperor appointed the East India Company as the Diwan of Bengal. The actual event most probably took place in Robert Clive's time, with a few Englishmen and Indians witnesses. But in the painting above, the event is shown as a majestic occasion taking place in a grand setting. The painter was commissioned by the Clive to record the memorable event in Clive's life. The grant of Diwani Clarify was one such event in British imagination. The need to improve the agriculture. Now the question arises why the Britishers needed to improve or to bring some reforms in the field of agriculture and how was it done. After 2 decades of debates on the question, the company finally introduced the permanent settlement in 1793. By the terms of settlement, the Rajas and Talukdars were recognized as Jamindars. They were asked to collect the revenue rent from the peasants and pay revenue to the company. The amount to be paid was fixed permanently. That is why it was known as permanent settlement. It was not to be increased ever in the future also. It was felt that this would ensure a regular flow of revenue or income into the companies of and at the same time it encouraged the seminars to invest in the improving of land. Definition of Mahalwari or the system which was introduced by Lord Cornwallis. Permanent settlement has some drawback, that is why Mahalwari system was introduced. In British revenue records, Mahal is a revenue estate which may be a village or a group of villages. Monroe system. In the British territory, in the south, there was a similar move away from the idea of permanent settlement. The new system that was devised came to be known as Rayatwar or Rayatwari system. It was tried on a small scale by Captain Alexander Reid in some of the areas that were taken over by the company after the wars with the Tipu Sultan. Subsequently developed by Thomas Munro, the system was gradually extended all over southern India. Reed and Munro felt in south there were no traditional jamindars, so the settlement, they argued, had to be made directly with the cultivation ryots who had tilled the land for generations. Their field had to be carefully and separately surveyed before the revenue assessment was made. Now, the second unit of the chapter that is related to the crops for Europe. The British also realized that The countryside could not yield revenue, it could also grow the crops that Europe required. It means not only the revenue, but they can grow some product from the fields for the Europe. By the late 18th century, the company was trying its best to expand in cultivation of opium and indigo because these two things were in great demand in the European market. In the century and a half that followed, the British persuaded or forced cultivators in various parts of India to produce other crops like jute in Bengal, tea in Assam, sugarcane in United Provinces now in Uttar Pradesh, wheat in Punjab, cotton in Maharashtra and Punjab, and rice in Madras. Madras means New Chennai. Now the question arises कि why the demand for Indian indigo arises. The indigo planters grow primarily in the tropics. By the 13th century, Indian indigo was being used by cloth manufacturers in Italy, France, Britain to dye cloths. However, only small amount of Indian indigo reached the European market and its price was very high. European cloth manufacturer therefore had to depend on another plant called woad to make violet and blue dyes. Being a plant of the temperate zone, wood was more easily available in Europe. It was grown in northern Italy, southern France, and in parts of Germany and Britain. Worried by the competition from indigo wood producers in Europe pressurized their governments to have the import of indigo from India. That is why the demand for the Indian indigo increased. Now plantation. So definition of plantation is a large farm operated by a planter employing various forms of forced labor. Plantation are associated with production of coffee, sugarcane, tobacco, tea and cotton. Means all these crops are cash crops. Britain turns to India. Faced with the rising demand of indigo in Europe, the company, means East India Company in India, looked for ways to expand the areas under indigo cultivation. From the last decades of the 18th century, indigo cultivation in Bengal expanded very rapidly and Bengal indigo came to dominate the world market. In 1788, only about 30% of the indigo imported to Britain from India. By 1810, means within few years, the proportion had gone up to 95%. Means from 30% it reaches to 95%. As the indigo trade grew, commercial agents and officials of the company began investing in indigo production. Over the years, many companies of officials left their job to look after their indigo business. Attracted by the prospect of high profits, numerous Scottishmen and Englishmen came to India and became the planters. Those who had no money to produce indigo get loan from the company and the bank that were coming up at time. How was indigo cultivated? That time in India, how was this cultivation of indigo was done. There were two main systems of indigo cultivation, niche and rayati. Within the system of niche cultivation, the planter produced indigo in the land that he directly controlled. He either bought the land or rented it from other zamindars and produced indigo by directly hiring laborers. The problem with the niche cultivation. So many problems were there with the niche cultivation. The planter found it difficult to expand the areas under niche cultivation. Indigo could be cultivated only on fertile lands, and there were already densely populated. Only small plots scattered over the landscape could be acquired. Planters needed large areas in compact blocks to cultivate indigo in plantation. Where where could they get such landforms? They attempt to release they attempt to lease in the land around the indigo factory and evict the peasants from the area. But this always led to conflict and tension. Indigo on the land of riots. Under the royalty system, the planter forced the riots to sign a contract, an agreement called satta. At times, they pressurized the village headmen to sign the contract on behalf of the riots. Those who signed the contract got cash advances from the planters at low rate of interest to produce indigo, but the loan committed by the riot cultivation indigo on at least 25% of the area under his holding. The planters provided the seed and drill, while the cultivators prepared the soil, sowed the seed, and looked after the crop. When the crop was delivered to the planter after the harvest, a new loan was given to the Rayat, and the cycle started off all over again. Peasants who were initially tempted by the loans was how quite upset with the system. The price they got for the indigo was very, very low, and the cycle of the loan was a never ended. In this way, these Britishers, on the name of reforms, they try to exploit the Indian agricultural system. In this way, they exploited the entire countryside of India.